What's up guys, Josh Mosman here from Motocross Action Magazine. We're out at Glen Helen getting ready to ride the 2020 RMZ450. It's going to be a good day, we're really looking forward to it. This is our final 450 bike to test before we get into our 2020 450 shootout. This Suzuki hasn't changed. We're a little bit sad about it. We wish they would have made a few adjustments, but it's actually basically exactly the same as the 2019 model. Only a few color things have changed. The triple clamps went from like a dark gray color to standard silver. The ignition cover and the clutch cover have changed colors as well. And then also the graphics just have minor changes. So another great thing about this 2020 model is that because it's exactly the same as last year, you can go to your Suzuki dealership and pick up a 2019 model for a fraction of the price. And you can use all the money you save on buying a new bike to upgrade maybe the suspension, ECU, exhaust, etc. One of the great characteristics of the Suzuki is it's always been known to be a great turning bike, especially on flat, hard-packed corners. This bike really likes to turn and go. We did have some struggles with the shock last year. We had to lower the sag, so we actually added a longer link arm and lowered the sag down to 108, and that helped a bunch. So if you want to know all the details and everything that we thought about the 2019 model, you can click the link below to our full race test on that bike. For me, I'm just going to get out here at Glen Helen, put some laps in on this bike. I used to ride Suzukis back in the day when I was an amateur. Spent a lot of times on the Suzuki RMZ450 and also the RM125. So I'm excited to get out here on this RMZ450 and have some fun. Stay tuned to the end of this video to hear our first impressions on the 2020 Suzuki RMZ450. Alright guys, just got done riding the 2020 Suzuki RMZ450 and it was overall a pretty fun day. For me, the first thing I want to talk about is the power. MXA, we love the usable power of the Suzuki. It doesn't have the high horsepower that you see on the Honda or some of the other models, but it's got usable bottom and low and mid-range power that makes it easy to ride and pleasant to ride. Although you do lose a little bit on the start and you lose a little bit going up the hills, it's still an easy bike to ride and the power's there when you need it. Next, jumping into the chassis on the Suzuki. This bike in the past has been known as the best turning bike. It's always been great for turning into corners. As of recently, other bikes, and specifically the Honda, have really taken the characteristics that the Suzuki had and tried to copy it to really work on their turn-in ability. And so the Suzuki isn't really seen as the best turning bike anymore, especially with the changes they made in 2018 where they went with a stiffer chassis and the new BFRC shock. It kind of took away from that turn-in power. It still works well turning into corners, but not as easily. So talking about the shock, the BFRC shock is completely different than standard conventional shock. When the rear end is on the ground, it works well. Tracking, coming out of corners, stuff like that. But anytime you hit a jump, whether it's a steep jump or bumps and you're coming into a corner and your rear end is becoming unloaded, it's pretty sketchy. I had a hard time with it and it definitely kicks you forward because it is kind of soft and it just blows through the stroke. So the Showa BFRC shock is what used to be called the bi-tubo shock. It came from the road racing side of motorcycles. And so Öhlins actually makes a shock like this and it works really well. Unfortunately, Showa hasn't perfected it yet. So the difference between the BFRC shock and a conventional standard shock would be, in a conventional shock, the valving stack where all the shims are is at the bottom of the shock shaft. So when the suspension is compressed, the shock shaft goes down and pushes through the oil. The oil is then forced through the valves and through the shims, and the shims control the compression and rebound, and just controls how the shock works. Now with the BFRC shock, a blank plunger is forced down and pushes the oil into a secondary tube that goes up and around, and then that oil is forced all the way to the top of the oil reservoir, where it then goes through a shim stack, and that's where the compression and rebound all works. So the working of it is basically upside down, and it's quite a bit different. The upside down shock technology has been perfected by Öhlins, but Showa hasn't quite perfected it yet. So to fix the handling of this bike and really fix the characteristics of the shock, we had to lower the sag in the rear. We dropped it down to 108 today. That's where we ran it on our 2019 model, and we went back to the same old faithful spot on our 2020 bike. When we do this, to compensate with the balance of the bike, we have to move the forks up and down in the clamps. The only issue is if you move the forks too high up in the clamps, it'll make the bike shake at speeds, and if you move them too low, you'll actually take away that great turning ability that this bike is known for. Living with the BFRC shock is pretty tough. Dealing with the BFRC shock can be pretty tough. We do definitely recommend either sending the shock and the forks out to a suspension dealer that you know is comfortable with the BFRC and has a lot of experience with it. If you don't do that, you could also switch out to a WP shock or an Öhlins shock, or even stick on a Suzuki RMZ450 shock, which is still a conventional style. So we do appreciate that the Suzuki is cheaper than the rest of the bikes, especially if you grab a brand new 2019 model. You'll get it for a fraction of the price at your local Suzuki dealer. The only issue is that you will have to use the extra money that you saved to upgrade the suspension. The forks on the RMZ450 are the same as they are on the Honda and Kawasaki models. They just have minor differences in the valving. So standing alone, the forks are great, but with the BFRC shock, it's kind of hard to know that these are the same forks that you can find on the Honda and in Kawi. So if you find a shock that complements the forks better, you'll really like them. Once you get the rear shock dialed in, you'll find that the bike is smooth and pleasant to ride. We also want to talk about Supercross privateers. A lot of 450 guys actually like this bike because of the stiff chassis. It turns really well, and it's stable. They're not going down long, fast straightaways, so it works well in tight situations. Also with Supercross guys, they're changing out suspension, they're changing out all kinds of things to make the bike what they like. So there are a lot of benefits to this bike, and if you work out a few of the kinks, this bike will be great to own. And last thing to note, because it is the same as the 2019 model, it still has a kickstart. We're sad to say it. The rest of the 450s in this class all have electric starts, and we really like it. Sad to say, Suzuki still has the kickstart. So obviously today was just our first ride on this 2020 bike. To check out the full test and review, check out a future issue of Motocross Action magazine, and make sure to check out motocrossactionmag.com to stay up to date on Supercross results, news, reviews, and all our latest bike tests and videos. And if you haven't seen any of our latest 2020 450 videos, here's your chance to catch up, and make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on Motocross Action's latest video releases.